Probably not the most amusing time slot after lunch. I hope you won't have a crash. Hope you had some of the sweets downstairs. Those were really good. Yeah, so this session is actually part of the learning pathway, creating impactful data visualizations in Power BI. And I'm the third and last session of the day. I was just wondering, have any of you attended the other ones today? Oh, that's good. Oh, that's awesome. Happy to hear that. Becky and Valerie did an awesome job. I'm super happy how it went from what is data storytelling, why we need it, then a bit more practical tips like why, how you can actually create a report if you just have the data. We'll learn how to bake a cake out of our data. And now I would say it's probably kind of the cherry on top. We're going to talk about accessibility. So I know it's not the most fun topic out there, but I would say it's one of the most important ones. So I'm very happy that you're attending this session, and we are going to make it a bit more broad, so not only about accessibility in Power BI, but also about what inclusive design actually means. And before I start, just briefly about myself. So my name is Elena Drakulevska. And actually, PASS Data Community Summit has a very special place in my heart because I actually started speaking for the first time at PASS Data Community Summit. And it was just last year that I was, well, not really on this stage, it was on the other, the old part of the convention center, that actually gave my first in-person session. It was part of the new speakers track. So yeah, it's been a journey this year, but I'm very happy that I'm standing here today again, and this time as part of a learning pathway even. And I'm very happy that I can share some things that I'm very passionate about, which is Power BI and user experience design. And I consider myself very lucky to be working as a BI consultant. I work at a company called Betelligent. It's a German data consultancy company, but I'm actually based in Vienna, Austria. Originally, I don't come from there. I come from Macedonia. Next time, I'll try to include a map where that is. It's a super small country just north of Greece in Europe. I always say it's like a small country, but with a big heart. So if you ever get a chance to visit it, I can highly recommend it.
What's the language in Macedonia?
It's surprise, surprise, Macedonian. It's a Slavic language, so it's similar to Serbian, Russian. I mean, it's in the same family, and we write Cyrillic.
Okay, so it's not a romantic language.
No.
How many languages do you know?
Okay.
People from Europe know like 8.
I'm fluent in 5. I've learned 7. Yeah, so. Well, you know, when you come from a small country like Macedonia, you kind of have to learn another language. We're 2 million people, so with Macedonian, you cannot do anything.
That's why you're speaking and we're listening.
Yeah, hopefully. So a bit about my background. So I lived in Italy for a while. I did my master's at Politecnico di Milano. I lived in Milan. And I have a background in telecommunications engineering. So I kind of switched over to data, and then I stumbled upon UX design. So people sometimes ask me if I have a background in design. I do not. I'm an engineer, like probably most of the people in this room. And as I was learning about user experience design, I realized, you know, so many of these things are common sense and maybe are not super hard. But when you come from an engineering background, you don't really think about design. Maybe you think how you can solve problems, you can do that, but we don't really think about design. And actually, I kind of started speaking because I realized probably also a lot of people like me out there do not really know much about design. And I try to make it accessible, I try to make it easy, I try to explain it and bring it closer. So everyone that listens to me or reads my blog can actually pick up something, and you know, my idea is to change your thinking, or maybe for you to think in a new way or get a new perspective, you know? So it's not, I'm gonna show you that some of those things are not super complicated. So accessibility is a big part of user experience design, but before learning about user experience, I actually never thought about accessibility, although I was working and creating Power BI reports. You don't want to go back and see how my reports used to look like. Accessibility wasn't even part of it. So I'm just wondering, how many of you here work with Power BI? That's great, full room. How many of you, I mean, probably, I hope you have heard about accessibility, but how many of you actually pay attention to it? Like, do you incorporate any accessibility techniques in your reports? Okay, it's a very small percentage of the people that actually raise their hand, but it's fine, because I was there. I was just as you guys. I never, when you don't think about it, you cannot really do anything about it. So that's why I'm very happy you're here today. One thing I didn't mention, so I recently started a blog at the beginning of this year. It's called Moonstory. You can find it at moonstory.design. I try to blog more, or at least I'll try to blog more next year, let's put it like that. But I can highly suggest it for you to check it out, and feel free to subscribe. Don't worry about the details. I'm going to share them again at the end. So I'm just going to actually start with a video, and I'm going to, it's an ad. I'm going to let it speak for itself, and then we'll briefly talk about it. Hope we have sound.
People think that having a disability is a barrier. But that's not the way I see it. You can catch up with friends.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
And you can start the day bright and early. You can take a trip to somewhere new.
3 miles to the summit.
You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
You can take the long way home. Or edit a film like this one. When technology is designed for everyone, it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
Yeah, it's an Apple ad. I'm not paid to do it. I've seen this ad a couple of times. I've watched it, I'm using it in my presentations, and every time, like, I stand there and I watch it and listen to it, and every time it gets me. A lot of these people live with some form of disability. And sometimes we're not really aware people have a disability. So sometimes, it's obvious, right? We have a neighbor that cannot walk. We have, our mom is in a wheelchair. We have a cousin that has ADHD, So not every disability is really something that we can actually see. So yeah, if someone has a broken leg, of course we can see it. But some of those times, disability is also hidden. So we have different different ability. I don't want to say disability because it's just because someone has a different ability than ours. And the thing is, so we watched a video, right? We want to make technology closer to everyone. We want to help everyone use technology. So why should reports be anything different than any other device that people are using, right? So if someone has a wish or wants to do something but just because they cannot do it because it's not made for them, they won't be able to do what they love. right? I love creating reports, and I can do it. But what if someone else also loves creating reports, but cannot do it because maybe the technology is not accessible, or maybe they want to use report, they love data visualization, right? But they cannot really navigate the tools or the report that we've created. So I always say, what if, we cannot help everyone out there, right? But what if we can help just one person do what they love? Should we try to do it? Or should we just say, oh, well, it's just one person, why do we bother, right? So I really think that if we can do something to help at least one person out there, we should do it. But also, if there's anything that you pick up today, is that by helping or trying to help this one person, we are actually helping everyone understand or better understand reports that we are creating. So we're going to talk about different tips and tricks on how to do it. And the idea is that basically if we are designing with accessibility in mind, we are actually improving the experience for everyone else. So I'm just going to let this number go in the background. Does anyone know how many people in the world live with a serious form of disability? And this number will probably going to reach the goal while someone answers.
1.5 billion.
Yeah, you're pretty close.
Get a t-shirt.
Well, I'm sure downstairs, if you go to the exhibitors hall, you can find a t-shirt from some of the exhibitors. Yeah, it's actually 1.3 billion, right? If you just see those numbers, it doesn't really mean much. And 1.3 billion, also, if you don't have a context, it also doesn't tell you much, right? And if you put it in a different way, it's actually 1 in 6 people. So in a room full of 60 people, you'll have 10 people that have some form of serious disability. So I'm talking about serious disability. Actually, the numbers for minor disabilities are actually even way higher. I think it's even around more than 40%. I don't want to throw any numbers, but so this is actually a serious form of disability. And to give you an idea, so we're not only talking about people not being able to walk, right? So we have different types of disabilities out there. So we have people who cannot take care of themselves. We have people who cannot move around by themselves, right? So maybe they have, either some form of temporary disability or maybe even something that's for life. We have people who cannot see, right? So we have vision. We have also hearing issues, independent living, so on, cognition. So I pull up some numbers from the US just to make it a bit more relevant for you because we're in the US at the end, right? And actually, those are official numbers that I've taken. I'm going to leave you the slides there later so you can actually check those numbers on the website and so on. So we have, I'm not saying that if you sum all this up, you'll get a number, and that's the number that people in the US live with that form of disability. It's just that sometimes, someone can have mobility issues, but can also have vision issues. So they're not really excluding this number. So that's why I'm not summing those up. I'm just saying, in the US and probably mostly around the world, we have people living with cognition disabilities that is 13.9%. And this is something that people don't really pay attention to. So it's not really disability, people who cannot walk, right? We also have vision, 5.5%. So obviously for report design, we don't really need to pay attention to, maybe not in the first line, right? Independent living and self-care, but we would concentrate today on the 3, let's say, most relevant ones when it comes to report design. And those are vision, obviously. We're talking about data visualization. We need to perceive those reports, right? We have mobility, because sometimes people, they need to use some other, they cannot move their arms, for example, and so on. And we have cognition. And we'll get to that in a moment, but I just want to point out that cognition is maybe something that we are not even considering when it comes to report design. And it's when it comes to ADHD, for example, there's actually a very high percentage of people who have different kinds of abilities, right? So we'll start with vision, because that is what we are doing. We are creating data reports, right? And to introduce this, I want to show you the next slide. Does anyone know who this is? Have you seen this animated movie? It's kind of new. It's an imaginary friend, yes. It's from that movie, from If. And do you know how it's called, the character? I don't hear, but okay, it's called Blue. So this is Blue. Anything weird about it? It's purple, yes. It's purple. And I watched this movie on the way coming here. I wanted to watch it for a while, and then I saw it on the plane. And I was like, sure, I'm gonna watch it. And this character comes out and he says, hi, I'm Blue. And like you, everyone is confused, right? Well, because the kid that drew him up when he was a kid was actually colorblind. And he couldn't tell those colors apart, and he just called him Blue. But he's actually purple, right? And this is something that, okay, I put it here. Oh. I can highly recommend it to watch it. It's a really cute movie. The thing is, when we are perceiving the world, we think and we see colors in one way, right? So we had Valerie today show you some stuff with green and red and so on. So this is the most typical thing, or color blindness that people can have, right? So if I tell you like what are the green and red apples, so someone who has some color blindness won't be able to tell those colors apart. I mean, probably there are techniques, right? So I've talked to people who have color blindness just so I understand how they're perceiving this and how they're figuring out which color is which. But the thing is, it's not only about color blindness. So the thing is, the colors that we pick actually are very important. Now with Valerie, we're talking about the English phrases and so on. So it plays a huge role, right? So I'm gonna show you this next slide. And if I ask you, what are the, A, B, C, and D? So you would probably say A and B are one color, right? And C and D are different color. But they're the same. The thing is, when certain colors are surrounded by other colors, you can perceive them in a different way. So colors play a huge role in your report design. So it's very important to select colors that have good enough contrast that people can really tell them apart. Right? So I'm going to bring this back. It's very, very important. And there are tools out there that can help you figure out. So now I'm thinking if I should show that right away. Welcome. So we're talking about color blindness and people who have vision issues, right? So I told you there's 1.3 billion people in the world that have that live with some serious form of disability. But for vision, we said, like for the US, it's 5.5% in the world in general. This number goes up to 300 million people. But the thing is, color vision deficiency wasn't made equal. So it's not like every person that sits here has the same chance and probability to get it or to have color blindness. When it comes to, so I pulled up some numbers for the Western world, so for example, US, but not only. And there is actually, when it comes to the male population, the percentage is so 1 in 12 people can have color vision deficiency. But when it comes to women, this number is actually 1 in 200, right? So like the chances for women to be, to have some color vision deficiency problem is less than 1%. And for the male population is 8%. It can go up to 8%. And actually, if you think about the fact that we are in IT, like we're in the tech industry, right? So we have a lot more male population over there. We also have many people in C-level positions that are actually males. So the probability to find someone who actually has some problem or vision deficiency issue or color blindness is actually super high. And I was super curious, like how and why is this like that, right? Like why is it not the same probability? And the answer lies in genetics and biology. So you have, X and Y chromosomes. So for a male to be colorblind, they need just the one X chromosome to be with color blindness, and for women, we need 2 of them. So the probability of that happening is way, way lower. Anyway, back to data visualization and text and contrast and colors. So the first thing that we need to make sure is that we have good enough contrast between the colors that we're using, right? And it comes with, we're talking about text, but also, other colors that we are using for our visuals. So according to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, we have a requirement of having 4.5 to 1 text-to-background color contrast ratio. And I know this probably doesn't tell you much, so I'm gonna show you how you can check your colors. So there's a bunch of tools available online where you can do that. Let me just switch. But my favorite one for that is a tool called Adobe Color. So I would say check out the tool. You can also here generate color palettes and so on, but today we're going to talk about the accessibility tools. So if you go here on the color.adobe.com, there is a tab called Create here at the top. And right below you have accessibility tools. So here you can see the text color and the background color. You can actually put the hex codes and it will show you what's the contrast ratio. And now we can see it's not 4.5, so we can see a fail for our colors. And if we scroll down, we can see what is happening. So we can see here a clear path for icons and actionable graphics. So if you're using colors for bigger items and graphics, it's totally fine. You don't really need to have 4.5 contrast ratio. If you're using if you have text that is like 18 points and higher, you still have a clear pass, but you have a fail for 17 points and below. So keep in mind, if you're using text that's below or just smaller than that, you need to make sure that the color contrast is enough. So you can just, I can see people taking pictures, so I'm gonna scroll back up. So here, what you can do is actually, you can just slide this and try to find 4.5 or above. You can also here on the right, you can see some predefined, ready-to-go color combinations that are actually pre-picked with a certain contrast ratio. And over here, so I'm not sure you can see, but it says Tools Contrast Checker. Wow, this was terrible. And now, if we switch, we also have Colorblind Safe, something called Colorblind Safe. I think I picked another one because it had better, or maybe. Okay, so here we can see some conflicts. So we can see how people actually perceive the colors that we pre-picked. If someone has color blindness, you can actually see there's like a simulator where you can actually see how people with different color blindness can actually see those colors. We can also see there are some conflicts between the colors and so on. They are shown with this like line between them. It says even possible conflicts found, so move it around so you can find colors that are actually not in conflict. But I'm actually curious to see how people would see the colors that I've picked. So sometimes, now maybe this is not the best example, but you can have green and red that are actually look quite similar, right? So it's very hard to tell them apart. And when you just use colors around, people may struggle to understand that something is good or bad, So the thing is, whenever you're using colors, you want to make sure that they are accessible, right? So you want to make sure that they are understood by everyone. So the first key takeaway for today is use accessible color palettes and check your contrasts. So use adobe.color.com. You can also find it on other like colors.co. It's also a nice site for that. Just find whatever works for you, whatever you feel comfortable working with, and yeah, try to implement it, right? So use accessible color palettes. And the thing is, so if you're just showing colors without some additional, if that information is not really coded in any different way, it will be hard for people to understand. So sometimes to improve the experience or to make it clear what that color means, you actually want to use, for example, icons, right? So you can use icons. You have these visual cues in a table that Valerie was talking about today, right? So you have maybe arrows pointing up and down. They are in different color. It's hard to tell them apart, but they're also different, right? So we have an arrow upwards and an arrow downwards. So they need to be different. You need to be able to tell them apart. I put here dashed lines, what you can use, for example, in a line chart. Probably I would use maybe markers, so not really dashed lines, depending on the use case, right? So you want to make this, you want to make it recognizable. So you can use different markers, or maybe just one of the lines should have marker, and so on. And don't rely like for example, if you just use a legend, and you want your users to switch their eyes between the legend and the line, it's a bit harder to interpret, right? So if you have a chance, whenever you have a chance, just use the series labels, right? I know sometimes if you have a lot of lines, which I'm saying you shouldn't use a line chart for that. So if those lines are pretty or enough away from each other, and you can clearly write the series labels over there, I would always suggest use that and not a legend, right? But this is, if it's like 2, 3 lines, you cannot do it with 10 lines. And probably for that, you don't need a line chart. Also, if you print stuff, so we heard a lot of people wanting to print their reports and stuff like that. So try to think about those things, right? So try to think how color would look like printed. If it's a yellow, very light color, won't really be good enough contrast and so on. Just try to make sure you pay attention to those things, right? Even if it's black and white report, right? You need to somehow tell those things apart. Okay, so we're talking about using icons and packing this information in a different way. So we don't really want to rely just on color, right? And I always try, and I want to think that I'm not biased, but I'm biased just like everyone else. And even if I say I won't use green and red for saying things are positive or negative, so I had here, for example, the orange and blue. You can use maybe red and blue, but also think about, do you really need to use both colors, right? Do you really need to say this is good, this is bad, right? So maybe you can just use gray for one of them, and try to emphasize just the one that's important. I don't know. If you want to show that things are going great, show just the green one if you're used to using that green. But try to avoid maybe using those 2 colors, right? Because you're always adding to the report, you're adding to the, you're overloading your users, right? Because color is always adding processing. When people see it, you need to understand what this color means. Right? So we are human beings. We associate things with meaning that helps us navigate the world, right? So, as I said, I'm also kind of biased, right? So I'm also kind of associating green with good and red with bad. And earlier this year, I actually went to the Faroe Islands. It was Valerie also there. And we rented, so me and my partner rented this van, and we're like, okay, we're going to explore around for a couple of days, the Faroe Islands, and then I'm going to go to this conference. And I was super excited. It's my first time we are renting. We're sleeping on the road. Everything goes well. And there's the guy that's like giving us the van. and he's like showing us the gas bottle and all that. And he's like, well, you know, for 3 days, you're probably not gonna need it. But just in case you run out of gas, this is how you can change a gas bottle. And I've never used gas bottles in my life. So we're just standing there hoping things won't go wrong, we'll have enough gas. And he's just showing us like the gas bottle and everything. And he shows us this. He's like briefly showing those two things, and I see something. He's like, well, yeah, if you see this, if you see red, well, he says something, and I'm like, okay, red is closed, green is open, and I was like, well, something is weird here, because as he was showing that this is open, I saw red, and I'm like, I'm really sorry, I have to ask. I thought you said this is closed. And he showed me, and if you zoom over here, probably you won't see much, wait. So actually the red thing means fire. It means that the gas bottle is open. So probably people here know that, I had no idea. So the red thing is fire, and that means you shouldn't open it. But in my head, it was, okay, this is red, this means it's closed, so I can freely take out the gas bottle. Well, apparently in the fire world, red means fire, which is also kind of logical, right? So I put my head over there, and you can see the icons are different, right? So the information is not only packed in red and green, but you can also see something that looks like fire on the red one and a green line on the green one. But it took me time to adjust to that thought, you know? So the thing is, why am I telling you all this? Is because you want to use icons that make sense, right? So when you're packing this additional information, you use an icon and you use a color, but you also want to make sure that you're not sending mixed signals and you're not confusing your people, right? So avoid sending mixed signals, like this one. Sorry, we're closed, and the sign is green, right? So I had Vitalia send me this one. I don't see her here, so shout out to her, because she was like, I was listening to your presentation, and then I saw this, and it reminded me of you, and I was like, yes, this is what I needed. This is a great example, right? So you want to make sure that this information is, you know, aligned. So use universal icons when you're using icons. So you also don't want to so you don't want to leave it to interpretation, right? So when you're creating reports for different parts of the world or for different industries or different audiences, people may associate certain icons with certain things, but outside of that bubble, like that fire thingy, I was totally outside of that world, right? For me, red was closed. So you want to understand the users that you are creating the reports for, how they're thinking and so on, what is their culture. If they come from different parts of the world, maybe some icons mean different things. So you want to be, to understand that. Now, there are some universal icons out there, right? We have information, we have settings, we have home. Most of the times, hopefully, around the world, this is more or less same. But when you're creating reports and you give the reports to your users and they're navigating on their own, maybe they associate some icon with something else. And they start struggling. So if they click something and hope to see or expect to see, I don't know, settings, they see help or whatever is the issue, right? So you want to make sure that the users always know where they're navigating to and what those icons mean. So you don't want to leave it to interpretation. Although you're packing the information there, so you're putting an icon, you really want to make sure that that is understandable. And how to do that? Well, you can add some text. If you're using information, just write information, right? If you have a navigation page, or navigation bar, sorry, you can use icons next to the text. If you think that you're overcrowding your report with that, you can always pack that information somewhere, like on a tooltip, but it's still there, right? So you want your users to understand what those icons mean. And as I said, for example, you have this navigation bar, you have some icons over here. Most of them, I don't even know what they mean. Okay, maybe not most of them, but anyway, and over here, we have a navigation bar that's actually with icons and with text. Some of them maybe do not make sense. This is just a screenshot that I've taken just to show you what I mean. But as I said, you don't always need to put that text over there. You can always add it to a tooltip. But if you can, just do this, at least for the navigation. So key takeaway number 2, find other ways of conveying information. Don't rely just on color alone. Don't rely just on icons alone. Always try to pack that information in at least 2 ways so you can make it understandable for everyone. Because, sometimes when people are using a report and they start struggling when you're not getting to that page that you wanted to get, you're not maybe understanding all the insights that you've put, the users are not understanding all the insights that you've put there and so on. But you don't want that, right? You want everyone that uses your reports to understand what you've put there because, you've created the report for that. Okay, are there any questions for this part?
Earlier regarding the color blindness, I go back to Valerie's example about how there's a company that wants to keep a pie chart, a colorful pie chart. How would you get around that sort of issue where they want all this color for a top 5 sales regions or whatever, and they want it broken down by color? How would you get around that?
I'm trying not to put more than 2 colors on one chart. Try to divide it in different charts maybe. Try to understand why they want to do that. Make it clickable, and then some things would be highlighted and not really with color, or maybe make it all switch around. But I like that question.
Would it be optional to apply a texture to those pie chunks? So like you have the dotted line, stuff like that. So maybe.
I mean, keep in mind that every time you're doing that, you're adding clutter. So I want to keep my design simple, and you don't really want to put that much information. I shouldn't have asked if there's any questions, but yes, sure.
Nathan Yao in his book addresses this very question. And I don't know that there's a universally agreed answer, but his opinion is, and in his examples, he uses different shades of the same color, which means that it's always monochromatic. So imagine that it's a magenta chart, and you have dark, lighter, lighter, lighter still, and that translates to black and white and grayscale.
No, I'm just gonna chip in over here and we'll move on. Try to be careful with using those shades colors because they're also hard to tell apart if it's someone who has color blindness, for example. You can use them, for example, if it's a map and you want to show if it goes from low to high, but you don't really want to have that I wouldn't use it in a pie chart and not in a bar chart. Okay.
I hope it's a relevant question. You mentioned about the contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. Like in this example, your background is white, your foreground is black. Is it background 4.1 and text 1, or it's irrelevant either way?
It's irrelevant. You can put them, you can switch them out, yeah. And
Black background and white is just as good as white.
well, we're getting there, right? So welcome to the dark side. I know it's a white background, but anyone here a fan of dark mode? Oh my God. You must be very happy with the new updates. But building on that, so the thing is, we are used to reading, and it's way easier for our brains and our eyes to read information when it's the other way around, when the background is white, because that is not really adding to not overwhelming us, I don't know about you, but I really struggle when I see dark background and some white text, and actually a lot of other people struggle as well. And the thing is, I'm sorry, I'm gonna break it to you that I'm not a big fan of dark mode, but I would just say be careful, be really careful about it. And I'm now even more concerned because when everything is in dark mode, it feels natural to create a dark report, right? Because otherwise the canvas is screaming at you even more. So I'm gonna say to this, surprise, we lied about the cookies. Because, it should, unless explicitly asked for by your client, create me because I'm gonna use it and I want to have a dark report, you should absolutely not do it. It shouldn't be your go-to thing. And now, keep in mind, it's not one story fits all, right? One answer fits all. Keep in mind that at night, yeah, of course, we want to see like toned down colors. Dark mode is very good for our eyes at night, right? So otherwise, like the blue light and the screen is really in our eyes. So if you have, I had this very great example from Roman over here, who has also a session today. I think it was at your session that you said that, when there's people who are, for example, working the third shift, working at night, and everything is dark, you actually don't want to use light reports, right? So you want them to be able to just pick up those, red signs or whatever, something that is really taking your attention. But otherwise, if it's everything white, it's gonna be in your face. So that's why I'm saying, know your audience. It shouldn't be the first and go-to thing that you're doing to create a dark mode report. But you can always think about it, maybe try to understand your users, if they're using the report at night and so on. It may be better, but most of the people read better and perceive reports better when they are light reports, basically. So the accessibility tip would be avoid dark mode reports unless asked for explicitly. Yes?
I perceive it in the future that people are going to be able to change their own screens so that their reports are going to show up in whatever, dark mode or light mode, whatever they prefer. Are there color palettes that work for both so that when we create reports to try and future-proof them?
Okay, so the question is if there is a color palette that would work for both light and dark mode report that people can actually switch on their own in the future. That is, yeah, I think it's always better, always. It would be better if that is automatic, right? You switch to dark mode and maybe you can see your report in a darker mode. I don't think there's something that works great for both. To be honest, I've never created that. I don't really know if there's a color palette that would work for that. Maybe it's not a bad idea to find one. But ideally, how I would perceive it is if you have in the future the possibility to change the report on your own, maybe give the options for the colors to be picked, and you can always adapt it.
Have you seen a lot of, or have you designed an information product that has a slicer where you can select whether you want a particular mode, and that slicer drives the colors that are used in each visual, creating in a DAX-driven way, a dark mode and a light mode? Have you seen any of that happening? I just can't recall all visuals currently for all components have a conditional formatting option that can be DAX-driven.
So the question is if you can have a DAX-driven choice of colors.
Not if you can, but have you seen that kind of?
Yes, I have seen it, and we have Valerie here sitting in the first row. She has a very nice example of that, so I'm going to suggest you to check out her video on that. I think she also has a blog post about it. But the idea was not to go in that direction, but to really make you think, why would you even need a dark report, right, in the first place? I'm going to take your question, and then probably we're going to stop questions until the end, because now I'm worried if I have enough time, but yes,
Sorry,
go. No, all good.
So
not really harsher, but sometimes it's harder to read. And for most people, it would be harder on the eyes to read that information. So like the eyes struggle to read that information. That's what I'm saying. Not reading is harder. Okay, so we have something in Power BI that actually helps our users understand what is there, even if they cannot really read it. So we have screen reader compatibility, and that is active in Power BI by default. So if someone wants to use screen reader, the information on the visual will be read out. And the thing is, these screen readers can actually read the type of visual, they can read the title and subtitle, but it's not like you can really get the insights that are on your visual. So that won't be read or captured by the screen reader. And if you want to do that, you can actually add an alternative text to all of your visuals that basically a screen reader, when it goes over there, the alternative text would be also read out. So I can show you how you can do that in Power BI. And briefly, maybe just this, that in the past, tooltips weren't read and supported by screen readers. Now they're do, so you can also navigate on the tooltip as well. But be careful, I'm going to show you one more thing about the tooltips that you can make them even more accessible for people. Let's switch over to Power BI for that. Okay, and I'm actually using Miguel Myers' report from Microsoft. He's on the Core Visuals team. And maybe this is not the best example for that, but in the format pane, in the properties, so now I'm wondering if you can read this, but in the format pane, in properties, there's something that's called alt text. So this is the alternative text that you're looking for, and you can basically add a description over here that will be read by a screen reader when this visual is selected. But keep in mind, this is a static text over there. So it's not like, for example, if you write, oh, the greatest sales were in March or September or whatever, it's not something, if it's something that's dynamic and it depends on the, on the data that you have, this will stay static, and you don't really want to adapt that manually, right? So there is something that's, you have this function you should have. Did I change this? There should be, oops, maybe it's not, the visual is not selected. Maybe I can pick the cards. Alt text, okay, here we are. So we have this function, and basically over here you can use DAX and you can add dynamic text to it. So it will change and pick up the whatever change happened in the meantime, so you can basically be sure that that is correct. And one more thing that maybe I just want to briefly mention, so that you have tooltips, right? So sometimes if you have this preview feature off, that they are automatically adapting to the screen size and to the size of your visuals. For example, if you do something like this, and then you hover, you see the tooltip is going to be way bigger than the report, so it's not really adapting to the size. So you want to have this, this feature enabled, and you can find it under current file, report settings, and you can just switch on and off this toggle. I mean, enable it, because otherwise, if you want to zoom out, but also if you want to zoom in, so sometimes people want to zoom in the report, right? They want to read the information, but the tooltip will actually stay the same size. And if they want to zoom in, they probably want that tooltip bigger. So just keep that in mind, that you need to. Okay, so maybe I can show you File, Options and Settings. And then current file, report settings, and you have here tooltips, auto scale, preview. You want that enabled, this one. All right. So So we talked about vision, right? And that is kind of the most important part when it comes to report design. But something that is very neglected is cognition. So we actually don't really think about people because we don't see their disability, right? So we don't know if people have any struggles. And sometimes this can be super overwhelming. So if someone has ADHD, they don't really want to have they might be overwhelmed by the information on the page. And usually you see something like this, right? And even this is, I would say, kind of aligned because we have people also who are struggling with OCD, like obsessive compulsive disorder, and they want to have things that are super aligned, right? So if it's not aligned, it will bother them. So pay attention to those things, like try to create layouts, like report layouts that are, aligned and everything. Just try to, the design actually looks way cleaner and way better when it's everything aligned. I'm not saying this is, right? So this is an example of a bad report. It's a lot of information. Our eyes go over the page. They don't really know what to concentrate on. We don't know what's important. And for this, I have a great example, which is basically the Google's homepage, right? Over here, we can just see the Google logo, we can see the search bar, and we don't see anything else. Everything else around it is white space. And they're really masters at doing this, because what's the purpose of Google search is to search for information, right? So you want to have this search bar unmissable. You don't want people to miss it. But how do you do it? By using all this white space. By surrounding it in white space, you're actually making this search bar and this form pop, and you cannot really miss it. Even if you want to miss it, you probably won't. So try to use white space. I have a lot of clients, and they come to me and like, I've created a nice report, everything is aligned, everything is clean, a couple of visuals on the page, and they're like, what are we gonna do with all this white space? And I'm like, nothing. We're just gonna leave it there, right? Well, I was thinking maybe of adding just one KPI or maybe a couple of KPIs over here, So they start thinking in that way because they think that when you add information to a page, you're actually giving the user more, right? But that's not always the case. That's probably never the case. Because the more information that you add over there, the less certain information would be highlighted. Nothing is important, right? Or when everything is important, nothing is important. So there are different types of white space. There is space that is macro space, and we have micro space. So space between objects. So we want to leave more white space between the visuals. We want to have more white space on the report page, but we also want to have this white space inside the visuals, right? So there's this. So for that, you have the padding. You want to use more padding inside your visuals. That's like the margins of the visual. Then you also have the space, for example, between subtitle and title, or below the subtitle and the rest of the visual. So you want to use more white space because in that way you give more space to breathe and the information to breathe, and people can just go around it and read it. They're not overwhelmed by it. It's very it's not hard on the eyes. So think about people who have ADHD, right? Think about people who are struggling to read and understand information. And the thing is, when we are talking about these clients that just want to have information that is added on the page, I always try to actually subtract information. So the idea is not what can we add to this page, but the question is what can we actually leave out of this page, but still make it actionable, still convey the information that we want to convey, still have that insight and have our users understand it, right? So for that, I have the quote that is by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Sorry, my French is not, French is not one of the languages I speak. So perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Just think about this. Every time you try to add something to a page, try to ask yourself, do I really need this? Or does my user really need this, right? And always try to subtract things and try to separate information. Maybe if you really want to use that much information, try to separate it on different pages, for example. Add a navigation bar. Try to do those things. Not show everything all at once in one pie chart. So the third key takeaway for today is less is more. And this is really probably one of my favorite design principles. And this can be implemented and used for everything, like colors, right? Less colors is more colors, is more. Put less information. You will get more, people will get more out of it. Fonts. Maybe something that we don't really think about, and maybe we don't even think that they can also communicate things, maybe communicate emotion. Some fonts are harder to read, some fonts are easier to read, right? And for that, I will say fonts matter, right? I will always find you, depending on how it's written, we get different emotion out of it. So fonts matter. I'm not saying use this in your reports, right? I'm just trying to tell you that fonts also communicate this. And as I said, some fonts are harder to read, right? So try to avoid fancy fonts. Like, it's not really that you can find this on a report, but you can find this on a report. I would say avoid fancy fonts. Avoid serif fonts. Those are these fonts, like this one that's actually there that has these lines around. This is harder for some people to read, so that's why you want to use sans serif. I'm going to show it in a moment. But also avoid this. Avoid small fonts. Because you want your information to be readable by everyone. You don't want people to struggle to read it. So just as a summary, so use sans serif fonts. Those are the most common ones that you can find on a report. I would say choose from these ones. You can always import custom fonts, but be careful when you do it, because also your users and everyone that's using your reports also need to have those fonts at their side. So I would say just use what you can find in Power BI and try to avoid those serif fonts because they're harder to read. So font size, I have here body text at least 12 points, no text smaller than 9 points. So in Power BI, actually, when you're using data labels and so on, they can go, I think, down to 8. You'll never find an 8 in my reports. I would say at least 9. I try to do even a 10, but it depends on the report. So I would say, please try to avoid the 8 point because it's really, really small and harder for people to read it. So the key takeaway for this part is not all fonts and sizes were made equal. Some are more equal than others. I'm kidding. But yeah, try to think about those things. So, if you're creating something that's more playful, that is not really someone from the financial industry that's going to use it, feel free to explore, play around with it. Use some other fonts if you want, but I would say try to keep it low. And we have just one more short part, and I'll be done, I promise. So we talked about vision, we talked about cognition, right? And mobility is also something that is can be kind of limiting for people who are using reports. So for that, we can actually play around with Power BI, and we can use the keyboard just to go around Power BI and the visuals. I'm not a keyboard person, I always go around with my mouse. My partner is a keyboard person. I'm always seeing how he's using the keyboard and so on. I'm like, okay, I'll stick to the mouse. You do you. But the thing is, so it's not only for someone that has mobility issues, right? So we have people who are actually using keyboard to navigate a report. It doesn't really need to mean that they have some form of disability. So for that matter, you want to have the order of the visuals ordered. Well, the thing is, in Power BI, those things do not come automatically. You need to set those things up. And for that, so what the order would be, it's actually depending on how we read or how people read in their language, right? So if we're creating a report for people in the US, we want to read left to right, top to bottom, right? If we're creating a report from someone in the Arabic world, we want to do it the other way around. So we need to make sure that eyes, always start from the top left and go to the bottom right. And that is the logical way of navigating with the keyboard around your report. So you want all your visuals actually in that order. I'm just gonna briefly show you how you can do it, and then for questions, we'll leave it time like after I'm done. I didn't exit. No. Okay, we're good. Left is good. So here, if we go in the selection, so you can find it, if you're using this design, you'll find it on the side. If not, you can find it in view selection. And then over here, we can actually see something that's called layer order. Probably most of you are familiar with this, because when we are stacking things on top, we want to have the text above the shape, for example, and so on. So you're probably familiar, and I hope you are, with the layer order. But something that people are not really aware of is the tab order, and that is different than the layer order. So for example, over here, if I try to, let me just zoom out. Whoops, not that much. So over here, if I try to go around, you'll see how it's going all over the place, right? So it's not really the logical way of how we are reading the report. So we want to read the report top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom. And over here, we can actually, what we can do is we can also think how to do those things, right? So we want to, so you can just drag and drop these things. You can change the order in the tab order over here, and it will be in the order that you selected. But what I want to point out over here is that if you have something like this, right? Oops. See, I shouldn't use anything else but a mouse. So we are going, oops, top left to bottom right, right? But for example, here we have the whole visual over there. So that would mean that we want to go through all of that and then move on to the next thing. So just, it's not always the first thing that's there and then the second thing and so on. Just try to combine this information together, and it will be easier for the users. Let me. Okay, I'm just gonna stop you here. Let me just finish with my slide. So the report that I was using there is from Miguel Myers, and why am I using that report is because I'm also showing other things over there. I'm not saying that's the best report you can create. It's just something that I'm using to show things, and it's something that you can also use to explore things around Power BI, some of the new features that I have, like the new card visual and so on. So that is the reason why I'm using it. I'm not saying this is the most accessible report when it comes to colors and text. So I would say, please, please, please leave me feedback. It's super important for me to learn and grow. And I'm just gonna ask you, if it's not the best score, please let me know why. Sometimes I'm looking at the results and I want to understand how I can improve, right? Did you miss something? Did you want, I don't know, more examples? Feel free to let me know, just give me something that's more constructive, and then I can also use it. I'm gonna wait 1 sec. Okay. And I'm sorry I didn't leave time for questions, but I will be around, and feel free to reach out also on social media. I just wanna end with one quote over here. And it says, "The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect." And this is a quote by Tim Berners-Lee. He's the father of the World Wide Web. And I like to adapt this, and I say the power of DataViz is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of ability, is an essential aspect. So we want, if we circle back to that video in the beginning, right, we want to make sure that everyone can understand the reports that we are creating, that everyone can create reports on their own. We don't want people to struggle, right? And if we improve the experience just for one of these people, right, if we design with accessibility in mind, we are actually improving the experience for everyone else out there. And with that, I just want to thank you all for being here. I hope you learned something. And yeah, feel free to reach out on my social media.